have, this is, you are getting a panel of the management team of Urban Impact. So BJ Stewart is our COO and also leads our economic development area. Alicia Haskin is the director of Rainier Health and Fitness and leads our health and wellness area. And then Pastor Harvey, as the founder and president of our ministry and pastor here at Emerald City Bible Fellowship, leads our racial reconciliation area. And I lead our neighborhood transformation. And just as a quick intro, this is a fun time for me for a couple of reasons. One is, when I moved to Seattle, I came here with Youth for Christ. And somebody went off mute. And when my dad said I was coming to Seattle, he said, "Hey, look up this group. They used to be called City Chapel." And he was involved. And one of the men that came, that was on the thing, many of you might remember Bill Hewitt. Bill was a guy who had supported my father when he was the director of Youth for Christ here in Seattle, and supported me when I came, and was still on the board when I came back to Seattle many years later. And so the fellowship was one of the groups that I early on connected with when I came back to Seattle, kind of from my father's legacy and connection with the fellowship. So it's has some lifelong history for me. But I also wanted to kick off this morning saying that I'm one of those guys that really is a Bible conservative person. I really believe in the kind of foundation of Scripture. And in the creation story, which I think is really critical, God created night and He created day in the first day. Which for me, I think God's day starts about 5 or 6. So when Jesus rose early, I think it might have been noon. And so this idea of being at a breakfast at 7 o'clock in the morning, I think is really an ungodly act, but it is our culture. And it's just a good demonstration of how we've moved away from kind of a solid biblical culture to an American productive way. So I came into this work, as I mentioned, from being in youth evangelism with Youth for Christ. And we've asked each of our team to share their personal stories a little bit, and shifted and met Harvey and begin to wrestle with a couple of themes that have become themes for us. One is really believing the church as a foundation of kind of ministry and outreach, and kind of God's plan A is the church body. And working for a parachurch organization, always bumping into the fact that kids would get really excited about their faith, but if they didn't get plugged into a local church, that would fall off. And we see that happen as they get out of high school and they go to college, and maybe InterVarsity catches them, or maybe the Hidden catches them. But typically, there's this big journey, and they finally go back to the church through a lot of pain and hurt and heartache, and they end up kind of hopefully coming back and getting plugged in. We were wrestling with what if it was the church that reached them and connected with them and formed community early on and really embraced the whole family. Would that be key? We also started to see the family as being critically important, and had the opportunity early on to dream about this idea of Christian community development here in Rainier Valley, and partnered with Harvey in 1987 to kick off and launch this thing. I joined him literally on staff in '88, and took a hiatus, went over to Union Gospel Mission and developed youth services, and came back in 2004. And so the chance to be connected and seeing that dream come to reality, where you have a church that's really invested in a neighborhood. And we are now doing this in 3 different neighborhoods. So what we have, the property you're sitting on is what we would consider Rainier Beach area. And we have a fitness center that's just north of us that Alicia leads. We have some housing that we've been able to build. That's 61 units of affordable housing just north of us. And just had a long time community presence in the neighborhood. That when last night, Pastor met with the police chief and a bunch of grandmas and moms that were frustrated with the police situation. Right here, where you are, was this conversation. And it's about being present in the community and wrestling with the issues that the neighborhood is wrestling with, and just being present in the midst of that and bringing the resources that we have to bear. We're repeating this now in the Central District with Central Community Church, and just launched, we call them hubs, a hub in Tukwila with Grace Point Community Church, and are continuing to look at where are the other neighborhoods that have really been impacted by poverty, and then looking for a church that sits in the middle of that neighborhood that would partner with us and connect and be a presence and a hub in that area. Our dream is that by 2025 or so, we'd have 20 of these hubs kind of throughout this area, in these kind of, because poverty has migrated, and typically, it started, we had the Central District, that was kind of the core of kind of problems in the community. It was also the core of the African American community that moved south. Sorry, I just connected problems in the African American community. I should make that a natural connection. Moved south to now we're all, poverty's moved to Kent and Federal Way and Crossroads and Bellevue and Lake City in the north end and Everett even farther north. And so we want to see how we can kind of create that neighborhood presence. So that's what I bring to the table. Oops. Oh, you have your own mic.
Go ahead, Steve. Well, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to share. I guess this is my testimony. And I am amazed every time I hear it myself as I tell it. So I don't expect you to be amazed, but I'm easily amazed or amused. So let me just share. I am here, I can honestly say, out of obedience, right? So you say, okay, how is a kid from inner city Detroit? So when I say I'm from Detroit, Michigan, I'm not suggesting that I'm from one of the suburbs or from the nice neighborhoods in Detroit. I'm from the hood, right? So when I talk to people from Detroit and they go, hey, BJ, where'd you grow up? I go, oh, I grew up in, that part of town. They go, oh, okay. So I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and the fact is I was born to a middle-class family, upward mobile family. My father was one of the first black accountants in the state of Michigan, as he was a Korean War vet, and the GI Bill put him through school. I had a two-parent family. Both my parents have deceased, but as I grew up, middle class, I was still surrounded by the trappings of the inner city, right? And there were of us, there are 4 boys and a girl. So the fact that none of the 4 boys have ever spent a day in jail can be attributed to my dad's size 10s and the threat of it going somewhere where it doesn't normally belong. But I think is a tribute to the fact that I grew up privileged, right? When you talk about folk who grew up in inner city and you say, growing up privileged, somewhat entitled. No, I'm not going to use the entitled, but certainly privileged from the perspective that we had everything we needed. Didn't have everything we wanted, but had everything we needed. And that balance that my parents created really then enabled me to take advantage of this entrepreneurial spirit that I was born with. Bear with me. And what I mean by that, who knows what chucks are? Okay?
All right, Chuck.
So, who knows what beta bullets are? Y'all don't know what beta bullets are, right? Okay? Well, beta bullets look like Chuck Taylor gym shoes, but they are not Chuck Taylors, right? So my dad, when I came home, it's like, Dad, went to basketball practice today, and I was the only one that didn't have a pair of Chucks. And my dad said, son, okay, that's the difference between being rich and poor, right? When you're rich, your parents will buy you Chuck Taylors. When you're poor, you need to get a paper route or pull weeds or mow lawns to earn your own Chuck Taylor. So that began my entrepreneurial journey at about 12 years old, when I'm like, hey, I want a pair of Chuck Taylors. And it progressed to the difference between cool contact lenses and dorky glasses, and the difference between leather and pleather. Yes, I know what pleather is. So I grew up understanding that entrepreneurship can advance me. right? So graduated from the best high school the Detroit public school system had to offer, Cass Technical High School. Go Big CT! And went to Michigan State University, so I'm a Spartan, and graduated with an accounting and financial administration degree. Came out, worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big four, for 12 plus years. Spent about 8 years or so in corporate finance, mostly in telecom. And then this entrepreneurial bug rose up in my spirit again, and I quit my job with US West at the time, and my wife and I, business partner and I, we bought an Arby's restaurant franchise. And it went from, hey, I'm an entrepreneur in spirit, to I'm an entrepreneur and this is how I pay my bill. And there's a big difference between the two. And subsequently, my wife also quit her job at US West, and we acquired a staffing agency, and we were an entrepreneurial household. That's how we, built what little wealth we had, and put our kids through college, and purchased homes and savings, and etc. Subsequently, we sold those enterprises, and as I was rounding third base in my career, I was left with, okay, now what? Right? So I felt that it was a good opportunity to reset. I spent most of my adult life in Denver, Colorado, great place to live, but wanted to press reset. And we had spent some time here in Seattle in the mid-90s, and I recalled how entrepreneurial it was. And it's like, okay, how about Seattle? So sold the house, moved to Seattle, and in my church search, came across this Emerald City Bible Fellowship. Emerald City Bible Fellowship, the congregation that meets in this building, was the last church on my church search list, and I immediately felt at home here. And engaged with Pastor Harvey and Steve, and I think, at least, they were attempting to recruit me as a board member. And then they found out that I was looking for an opportunity. What I thought, coming back to Seattle, it being a very entrepreneurial place, and with my financial experience, with my entrepreneurial experience, for sure I'd be able to get on with a small, medium-sized business, startup. Seattle's very entrepreneurial, very vibrant startup community. And it'd be no problem. But before I could establish the relationships and refire up the network that would identify those opportunities, these guys, I met these guys. And they found out that I was looking for a career opportunity. And they go, hey, what are you looking for? And they go, you know what? That's exactly what we're looking for. And they invited me to join Urban Impact. And we were, going down a pretty straight path, I believe, until we got to the topic of compensation. And then I went, oh. And I had one of those Jesus moments that all of us have, where I came to that proverbial fork in the road. And in my case, it was this inner voice speaking to me, saying, I've led you, believe it or not, PJ, I've led you for 50 some odd years. I've led you to this place at this moment. And are you going to doubt now that I'm going to continue to take care of you? And I had to sit back and go, no, I'm not going to doubt. So with that, this comfort, comfort came over, my whole, spirit, body, and soul, saying that this is where God wants me right now, and I'm going to bloom where I'm planted. And I'm not sure how long that, this journey here at Urban Impact is going to be. At the time, I'm like, 6 months, man. Maybe a year, maybe 2 years, and it's 6.5 years later. So, as Steve indicated, I lead our economic development efforts. I'm the Chief Operations Officer as well, so it enables me to exercise kind of my trained competency from an organizational management perspective, but then allows me to also express my passion for entrepreneurship as I raise up and support the local entrepreneurs and small businesses. And we are growing like gangbusters from an economic development perspective, in that I was sharing with Al, we're entering the 9th year of our entrepreneurship program, which we call Sharks at the Beach. And we are growing. Last year we served over 100 local entrepreneurs and small businesses through our Sharks at the Beach entrepreneurship program. And then we have a business accelerator, which we call Thrive Business Accelerator, which provides a secondary level of support for Sharks at the Beach graduates, and then provides an opportunity to wrap our arms around other local small businesses. So that's my story, and I'm going to stick to it at least for the month.
He approves this message.
Oh, cool. That's right.